There will come a moment in your life when the world will look you directly in the eyes and tell you with total confidence that what you desire cannot happen. It will not whisper this to you gently. It will announce it through circumstances, through bank statements, through test results, through the silence of a phone that does not ring, through the faces of people who love you but who no longer believe with you. And in that moment, something inside you will be tested, not your intelligence, not your work ethic, not even your patience. What will be tested is your relationship with the unseen, your willingness to trust a reality that has not yet appeared over a reality that is screaming its evidence at you from every direction. Understand this before we go any further. The visible world was never meant to be your authority. It was meant to be your reflection. And reflections can be changed not by attacking the mirror, but by changing the one who stands before it. Think about this for a moment. Every single thing you now call ordinary was once, to someone, impossible. Flight was impossible until a man closed his eyes and imagined the sensation of leaving the ground. Instant communication across oceans was impossible until someone dared to assume it was already true and worked backward from that assumption. You are not being asked to believe in magic. You are being asked to remember something ancient, something that has been buried beneath layers of conditioning, something the wisest teachers throughout history tried desperately to tell us in parables because the truth was too vast for plain language. That truth is this: consciousness is the one and only reality, and everything you call solid, fixed, and impossible is simply consciousness that has not yet been persuaded to move. Let that sink into your spirit. Not your mind, not yet. Your mind will resist this. Your mind has been trained since childhood to trust only what it can measure, touch, and verify through repetition. But your spirit already knows what I am telling you, because your spirit has felt it in dreams, in moments of unexplainable knowing, in the strange comfort that visits you right before something shifts. The truth is that reality is not reporting facts to you. Reality is reporting your own assumptions back to you, dressed up as circumstance so convincingly that you forget you are the one who dressed them. Now, I want you to consider the story of the man who stood at the edge of an impossible situation and did not run from it, did not deny it, but instead closed his eyes in the middle of it and imagined a different ending. He did not pretend the difficulty away. He did not lie to himself about what his senses reported. He simply refused to give the difficulty the final word. He understood something most people never learn in an entire lifetime, which is that the outer world is always the last thing to change, never the first. The first thing to change must always be the inner conversation, the assumption, the felt sense of what is already true within. This is the secret hidden inside every scripture, inside every sacred text, inside every story of impossible transformation. The kingdom is not somewhere you are traveling to. The kingdom of God is within you, and it operates through the one function you use every single day without recognizing its holiness. That function is imagination. You must realize that imagination is not entertainment. It was never meant to be a toy for daydreaming and then discarding. Imagination is the very instrument through which the unformed becomes formed. It is the loom on which your entire experience is woven, thread by thread, image by image, feeling by feeling. When you imagine something vividly enough, when you feel its reality within you as though it has already occurred, you are not fantasizing, you are legislating. You are making a decree in the deepest court of existence, and that court does not ask for permission from your circumstances before it begins its quiet, invisible work. This is why the situation in front of you right now, the one that appears fixed, final, and impossible, is not actually the truth. It is simply the truth of a previous assumption that has finally ripened into form. Nothing shows up in your life uninvited. Everything you now call your reality was once merely a feeling you accepted as true. Whether you consciously chose it or absorbed it unconsciously from the world around you, feel this deeply. It is not meant to make you feel guilty. It is meant to make you feel free. Because if your assumptions created what you now see, then new assumptions held with the same conviction can create what you have not yet seen. Allow yourself to see this clearly. The word impossible is not a fact about the universe. It is a description of your current state of consciousness. When you say something is impossible, you are not describing the world. You are describing the boundary of your own belief and mistaking that boundary for the edge of reality itself. But consciousness has no edges. It is infinite in its capacity, endlessly creative, endlessly responsive. The only reason it appears limited is because you have been taught generation after generation to trust appearances over awareness, to trust the five senses over the deeper sense that lives beneath them all, the sense of inner knowing. Consider this. When a farmer plants a seed in the ground, he does not dig it up every single day to check on its progress, does he? He trusts an unseen process. He waters it, he protects it, and then he goes about his life holding a quiet confidence that what he has planted will eventually rise. And yet how many of us, the moment we plant a new desire in the soil of our imagination, immediately begin digging it up with doubt, with impatience, with the anxious question of when and how, as if our worry could somehow accelerate the harvest. Notice what happens when you stop digging. Notice what happens when you allow the unseen process the same dignity you would give a physical seed in physical soil. This is faith, not as blind hope, but as an inner knowing so settled that it no longer needs external proof to remain calm. You are not your circumstances. Let that phrase move through you slowly. You are not your bank account. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your rejection letter, your broken relationship, your unanswered prayer that seems to have gone unanswered for far too long. You are not the sum of what has happened to you. You are the awareness that is aware of all of it, the consciousness that exists beneath every experience, untouched by the experience itself, capable of choosing a new experience the moment you remember your authority. This is the identity shift that every true spiritual awakening ultimately requires. Not simply believing new things, but becoming someone new from the inside, so thoroughly that the old evidence has nowhere left to attach itself. Understand this. Reality does not organize itself around what you want. It organizes itself around who you believe yourself to be. Two people can want the exact same outcome with the exact same intensity, and only one of them will experience it, because desire alone is not the mechanism of manifestation. Identity is the mechanism. The moment you shift your inner sense of self, even slightly, even quietly, the entire structure of your experience must rearrange itself to match that new identity. Because the outer world has never once been the cause of anything. It has only ever been the faithful, obedient effect. Let this settle within you. Every great figure in Scripture who accomplished what seemed impossible did not begin by changing the world around them. They began by changing their inner conversation about themselves, about their situation, about what they dared to assume as already true before a single external sign confirmed it. This is the pattern behind every story of transformation ever recorded, whether wrapped in ancient parable or told in modern testimony. The order is always inward first, outward second, never the reverse. And when you try to reverse the order, when you try to change your feelings by waiting for the world to change first, you will wait forever, because the world is simply mirroring you, and a mirror cannot move until you move. I want you to imagine for a moment that everything you see with your physical eyes right now is simply a snapshot of a previous inner state, already completed, already finished, like a photograph developed from a moment that has already passed. The photograph cannot change itself. But you are not the photograph. You are the photographer, standing in the present moment, holding a new camera, capable of capturing an entirely different image the instant you choose to look through a different lens. This is what it means to live in the now, not as an escape from responsibility, but as the only place where creative power actually exists. The past is a photograph. The future is simply a photograph not yet taken. And the present moment, this exact moment, is the only place where the shutter can be pressed. Think about this for a moment. If your current results are the photograph of a past assumption, then it is not the results you need to change first. Trying to change results directly without changing the inner state that produced them is like trying to edit a photograph that has already been printed instead of adjusting the light before the next picture is taken. This is why so much effort in the world produces so little lasting transformation. People push against the effects with all their strength, exhausting themselves, while the cause sits untouched, quietly generating the very thing they are trying to escape. The truth is that you have been given a power so vast that entire religions were built around trying to describe it, and yet it operates so quietly within you, so continuously, that you rarely notice it working at all. Every night when you fall asleep, you are not ceasing to create. You are simply shifting from the visible tools of creation to the invisible ones. Your imagination does not clock out when your body rests. It is in the depths of that inner stillness, in the space between waking and sleeping, that your assumptions sink most deeply into the fertile ground of your subconscious mind, taking root far more powerfully than any amount of frantic daytime effort could achieve. This is why the state you fall asleep in matters so profoundly. Not what you did today, not what you accomplished or failed to accomplish, but what you felt, what you assumed, what you accepted as true, in that final, drowsy moment before consciousness dips beneath the surface. Notice what happens when you begin, even just once tonight, to fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled rather than the feeling of the problem unsolved. Notice what happens when, instead of rehearsing the day's disappointments in your mind as you drift towards sleep, you gently, deliberately construct a brief inner scene that implies your desire has already been realized. You do not need elaborate detail. You need only a feeling, a small imagined moment that could only exist if your wish were already true. Held with warmth, held with quiet gratitude, held the way you would hold a hand you have missed for a very long time. This simple practice, repeated night after night, begins to retrain the deepest layers of your being, layers that no amount of willpower or positive thinking on the surface could ever reach. You must realize that the subconscious mind does not argue with you. It does not evaluate whether your assumption is realistic. It does not check your credit score or your resume or your medical chart before deciding whether to accept what you feel as true. It simply receives, and then it begins faithfully, tirelessly, to arrange circumstances that correspond to what has been impressed upon it. This is both the most liberating truth you will ever learn and the most sobering, because it means you have been using this power your entire life, whether you intended to or not. Every fear you rehearsed, every worst-case scenario you played out in vivid detail, every identity of lack or unworthiness you accepted as simply who you are, all of it was received with the same faithful obedience as any deliberate positive assumption would have been. The subconscious does not judge the content of your imagination. It only responds to its intensity and its repetition. This is why, the moment you understand this law, you cannot go back to sleep, so to speak. You cannot continue imagining carelessly once you have seen how powerfully your imagination has been shaping your world all along. There is a certain sacred responsibility that awakens the instant you recognize this truth, and with it comes an unexpected sense of relief, because if you have been creating your circumstances unconsciously, then you can absolutely learn to create them consciously. Nothing about your past use of this power was wasted. It was simply unguided. And now, guidance is available to you, not from outside, but from the very awareness that is reading these words right now. Feel this deeply. The impossible situation you are facing was never actually about the situation. It was always, from the very beginning, about the story you were telling yourself in its presence. Two people can stand in the exact same set of circumstances, and one will call it the end while the other calls it the beginning, and both of them will be correct, because reality does not hand out fixed meanings. Reality hands out raw material, and consciousness is the sculptor that decides what that material becomes. You have been given raw material today, in whatever form it has appeared, financial, relational, physical, professional. The material itself has no final verdict written into it. The verdict is being written by you right now in how you choose to interpret it, in what you choose to assume about what comes next. Consider this: if you truly believed beyond any shadow of doubt that your current difficulty was simply the resistance before a breakthrough, the way a seed must push against soil before it reaches sunlight, how would you carry yourself differently today? Would your shoulders not relax slightly? Would your breathing not deepen just a little? Would you not begin to move through your day with the quiet confidence of someone who knows how the story ends, even though the final chapter has not yet been written in visible form? This is not naive optimism. This is spiritual maturity, the ability to hold an unwavering inner state regardless of what the outer senses are currently reporting, because you understand that the outer senses are always reporting old news, never new possibility. Let this settle within you. Faith, real faith, the kind spoken of throughout every sacred tradition, was never meant to be a feeling you wait to stumble upon. It is a decision you make repeatedly in the face of contrary evidence to trust the unseen creative process over the visible current condition. This is precisely why every meaningful transformation in history required someone to look ridiculous for a while, to hold an inner conviction that made no logical sense to anyone observing from the outside, because they were operating from a different source of information entirely. They were not reading the newspaper of current events. They were writing the newspaper of future events in the quiet privacy of their own imagination, long before anyone else could see a single word of it. You are not being asked to ignore your circumstances. You are being asked to stop worshipping them. There is a profound difference between acknowledging what is currently visible and bowing down to it as though it were the final, unchangeable truth. The wise ones throughout history walk directly through their impossible circumstances while internally living from the end already accomplished. And it was precisely this internal contradiction, held with unwavering steadiness, that eventually collapsed the outer contradiction entirely. The world cannot indefinitely resist a consciousness that refuses to accept its current terms. Something eventually must give way. And it is never the consciousness that gives way first. It is always eventually the circumstance. Understand this. Every circumstance you now consider impossible is simply waiting for a new assumption to be held long enough, felt deeply enough, and trusted completely enough that it can no longer remain in its current form. This is not about forcing anything. Force belongs to the old paradigm, the paradigm of struggling against effects. What you are being invited into now is a paradigm of allowing, where your only responsibility is to maintain the inner state of the wish fulfilled, calmly, patiently, joyfully, and to release the mechanics of how it will unfold to the same infinite intelligence that turns a single seed into a forest, that turns a single cell into a fully formed human being, that has never once needed your anxious supervision to complete its work. Think about this for a moment. Anxiety about how your desire will manifest is actually a subtle form of doubt disguised as diligence. It feels productive because it keeps the mind busy, but it is quietly reinforcing the very absence you are trying to escape, because you cannot simultaneously feel the anxious lack of something and the calm assumption of its presence. These two states cannot occupy the same inner space at the same time. This is why the instruction throughout every wisdom tradition has always been the same at its core. Be still. Not still as in passive or lazy, but still as in undisturbed, unshaken, rooted in an inner knowing so complete that no external report can move you from it. Allow yourself to see this. The impossible situation in front of you is actually a gift disguised as an obstacle, because nothing reveals the true depth of your inner conviction quite like a circumstance that offers absolutely no natural, logical pathway toward your desire. When the path is easy, faith is barely required, but when every visible door appears closed, when every rational avenue seems exhausted, you are being invited into the deepest kind of spiritual mastery, the kind that does not need a visible bridge to walk forward, because it is walking on the invisible bridge of assumption instead. This is the walking on water spoken of in ancient teaching, not a literal miracle meant to impress you, but a symbolic instruction meant to awaken you. It is entirely possible to walk forward in confident assumption while the water beneath your current circumstances shows no visible support whatsoever, as long as your gaze remains fixed on the destination and not on the apparent lack of ground beneath you. This is why the moment doubt creeps in, the moment you begin looking down at the turbulent waters of your current situation, instead of forward toward your fulfilled desire, you will feel yourself beginning to sink back into old patterns, old anxieties, old identities you thought you had already released. This is normal, this is human. Do not condemn yourself for it. Simply notice it, gently redirect your gaze, and continue. Spiritual awakening is not a single dramatic event after which you never doubt again. It is a continuous practice of returning again and again to the inner state that reflects who you are choosing to become, regardless of how many times the old identity tries to reclaim your attention. You are not becoming someone new by force. You are remembering someone you already are, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the evidence you have accumulated about your limitations. There is a version of you that has already moved through this impossible situation, that already lives on the other side of it, that already knows what it feels like to hold the answered prayer in trembling, grateful hands. That version of you is not a fantasy. It exists right now in the same infinite field of consciousness that contains every possibility simultaneously, waiting only for your attention, your feeling, your sustained assumption to bridge the gap between where you currently stand and where that version already lives. Feel this deeply. The bridge between your current reality and your fulfilled desire is not built with effort in the physical world. It is built with feeling, sustained and repeated in the inner world until that feeling becomes so familiar, so natural, so unquestioned, that the outer world has no choice but to reorganize itself to match what you have already accepted as true. This is not wishful thinking. This is the operation of law, as consistent and as reliable as gravity, though far less understood, because unlike gravity, this law works invisibly, silently, through the one instrument human beings have been given dominion over from the very beginning, the imagination. Consider this. Every time you catch yourself rehearsing the impossibility of your situation, describing it in vivid, convincing detail to yourself or to others, you are unknowingly using the exact same creative power to reinforce the very thing you claim you want to escape. This is not meant to shame you. It is meant to wake you up to how much power you have been holding this entire time, power you have simply been pointing in a direction you did not consciously choose. The invitation now is not to acquire new power. You already have it. The invitation is to redirect the power you have always possessed, to speak of your desire with the same conviction you once used to speak of your limitation, until the new conviction becomes stronger than the old one, until it becomes quite simply who you are. Notice what happens when you begin speaking differently about your circumstances, not through denial, but through a deliberate shift in emphasis, choosing to voice the desired outcome with the same certainty you once reserved for the feared outcome. Words are not neutral. Words are the visible edge of an invisible assumption, and every time you speak, you are either reinforcing the old identity or announcing the new one. This is why the wise have always been careful with their speech, not out of superstition, but out of a deep understanding that speech is simply imagination-given sound, and sound is simply vibration seeking form. Let that sink into your spirit. You are not waiting for reality to give you permission to feel differently. You are the one who grants reality its instructions through the feelings you persistently hold. This reversal of the usual order, feeling first, evidence second, is the single most important shift you will ever make in your entire spiritual life. Most people spend their whole existence waiting for outer proof before they allow themselves an inner feeling of security, success, love, or peace. But this is precisely backward, and it is why so many people wait an entire lifetime for a change that a simple reversal of order would have delivered far sooner. Understand this, the moment you decide to feel the security before the paycheck arrives, to feel the love before the relationship appears, to feel the healing before the body has visibly changed, you are not lying to yourself. You are aligning yourself with a deeper truth than the one your senses currently report, a truth that exists in the same eternal now, where all possibilities already exist simultaneously, waiting only for your attention to collapse them into visible form. This is not about denying pain or difficulty. It is about refusing to let pain or difficulty have the final word over what is possible for you. Think about this for a moment. If you knew, absolutely knew, that your current impossible circumstance was simply the darkest hour before an undeniable dawn, would you still be panicking the way you are right now? Or would you settle into a quiet, almost amused patience, the way someone waits for water to boil, knowing the outcome with such certainty that the waiting itself becomes peaceful rather than anxious? This is the state you are being invited into, not through blind denial, but through genuine spiritual understanding of how reality actually operates beneath its surface appearances. Allow yourself to see this. Every master who ever walked this earth and demonstrated what looked like miraculous transformation was simply someone who had learned to live from the end to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled so completely that their entire being radiated that assumption outward, influencing circumstances, people, and timing in ways that appeared miraculous only to those who did not understand the law operating beneath the surface. What looks like magic to the unaware is simply consciousness operating according to its true nature to the awake. You are being invited into that same awareness right now, in this very moment, regardless of how impossible your current situation appears. Feel this deeply. The impossible is simply the name we give to what has not yet been imagined with enough conviction. It is not a permanent category. It is a temporary label assigned by a mind that has not yet remembered its true creative authority. The moment you remember, the moment you truly deeply remember who you are and what you carry within you, the label begins to lose its grip. Not overnight necessarily, not always through dramatic visible shifts, but steadily, quietly, the way morning light steadily replaces darkness without announcing the exact moment the transition occurred. You must realize that you do not need the entire path illuminated before you take the next step. You only need enough light for the step you are on right now. This is why sustained daily practice matters so much more than sporadic, intense bursts of belief followed by long periods of doubt. Consistency in your inner assumption builds momentum the way water shapes stone, not through a single dramatic strike, but through persistent, gentle, unwavering contact over time. Every night you fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Every morning you rise and choose, even for just a few moments, to feel gratitude for what has not yet visibly appeared. You are adding another layer to a foundation that will eventually be strong enough to hold the entire structure of your new reality. Consider this. Patience in this context is not passive waiting. It is active inner fidelity to a vision the outer world has not yet confirmed. It is choosing again